Everybody that's outside, you're going to miss out. Yesterday we talked about defense against attackers. Today we get to be the attackers and discuss how to attack, the good, the bad, the ugly. There's a statement that is often used in that in order to defend your networks, you have to know how the attackers work. 25 years ago, that was not the belief, but more and more people are finally coming to accept, and especially people in a community like this, that unless you really understand the attack mechanism, the attack mindset, all of the things that go into attack, how can you possibly defend against it? So start thinking like attackers. Who in this room has ever attacked? You're not even lying. In the U.S., nobody would admit to that. They'd all be, the FBI would have them all off in jail by now. So we've received a number of questions, and we certainly want your questions as well. You know who Georgia is. She did a marvelous presentation on the Android issues that are going on, and I still have to have a conversation with you about that. And Mario's work on injections, spectacular, and those always have attack implications as well. So let's put on our black hat for the next 45 minutes and think about how to raise hell and mayhem. And the first question that's coming up, and I'm going to throw it out, is from a criminal standpoint, is it going to get better or is it going to get worse? Are we at the limit? How bad is cybercrime actually going to get?
I think it's going to get a lot worse, especially in the mobile sphere, which is my sphere of interest. I recently saw an interesting talk which went into why they think there haven't really been that many mobile talks or mobile attacks in the wild compared to what we see like in PC. And it's just not as economically feasible. If you're going to make a browser exploit and you make it for mobile Safari or for the Android browser, you might get, 10% of the users, whereas if you make it for Internet Explorer or Firefox, then you're going to get a larger amount of hits, and that's how malware writers make money. So as more and more people are using their smartphones or their iPads or their other mobile-esque device as their main device, then the economics of that is going to change, and I think we're going to see a whole new ball game. We have so much more stuff about ourselves on our phone. I always say, would I rather have them steal my wallet or steal my phone? And I'd rather let them take the wallet, honestly.
I kind of agree and I kind of disagree as well. So I would say yes, there's going to be more attacks, no doubt about that, because more people are going to have like mobile computing devices, tablets, laptops, whatnots, wearables. This stuff is trending as well. And there's going to be operating systems that are driven by apps, working like an app, working with injectable languages and stuff like that. So we're more and more heading towards a landscape that is very, very, very welcoming injections and injectability. So that is bad. But I think the main question is, are these attacks getting more in number, or are they actually getting worse? So I'm not really sure how we should apply a metric to that. Like, how can we measure whether an attack gets worse or the whole attack landscape gets worse? Because more, or just talking about the numbers, is not sufficient here, I guess.
Well, you can address it both from the number of attacks, because some people, and if you remember even only 10 years ago, some people considered an unrequested ping to be an attack. And most of us would say that's pretty stupid. Or do we look at it from the financial losses on a national or global standpoint?
I'm just thinking, like, if we talk about 100,000 more people losing their Facebook account, like, nobody gives a damn. Like, this is completely irrelevant. Like, no one cares at all. But if one person, for example, is being attacked and actually has, like, heart failure because of an injected pacemaker or an attacked dialysis machine or something like that, then you have like a clear discrepancy between the numbers and the actual impact. So I think we got to think impact here. Like, are people really going to use their mobile devices for critical transactions? Yes, we have mobile banking. Not sure, is anyone here in this room using mobile banking, like banking transactions from the phone? All right. Brave.
It's just going to get worse, and things with like the pacemaker, I mean, we've seen that happen. I think it's everything in our lives becomes something that has an IP address. Critical parts of our lives that I guess back in the day, if you wanted to attack someone, you showed up and you scaled their wall and you swam across the moat, and that's how you conquered someone. But now you don't even have to leave your living room, and you can get somebody on the whole other side of the world.
Which brings up a follow-up question from somebody. It's actually a very interesting question. And I'm translating a little bit. In order to fight global cybercrime, should we put up some sort of walls, electronic walls, between countries, such as has been done with the Great Firewall of China? Singapore has some. Would having those kind of walls between countries stop attackers?
No, the end.
I think more important than that would be having some sort of international cyber law, like how the UN has laws about war. You can't just go and attack somebody else. I think we need laws like that apply across the globe, because, you know, if you're in China and you attack the U.S., they don't put you in jail. They pin a medal on you. So I think we need more international law.
What's the audience think? You think laws are going to help? Show of hands for yes. Show of hands for no. Yeah, the laws, they stop people with guns. Laws stop people from drunk driving. Laws stop all criminals, do they not? I don't have to agree with you when you're up here, because that was actually one of the other questions.
At this point, there's like no recourse. If you hack across borders, I mean, the U.S. can't get countries to expedite people who have actually done really harmful things to the U.S., because the countries don't want to give them up. There is no real enforceable international crime law. If somebody blew up something physically, the countries in the UN would have to give them up. But there's nothing like that for cybercrime.
But still, tearing up cyber walls between cyber countries or whatnot is just the worst thing you can ever do. I mean, we have the internet, and the internet is one of the greatest inventions that has ever been done by man. It's bigger than the fire, in my opinion. So if we give that up, and if we give that principle up for just jailing countries in cyber walls or cyber walls, whatever, this is the wrongest thing we can ever do. We should better go ahead and just deal with the fact that the internet is international, it's in the name, and not make national networks that are separated from each other. And it's not going to change the attack landscape at all, I think. It's even encouraging people to dig deeper into cross-country attacks, because there's a bigger challenge and stuff like that. And there's going to be complexity and new bugs and new vulnerabilities, so I'm sticking with my no, not at all.
And while we're talking, please just raise your hand, shout out, question, and we'll get to you. Absolutely, because this is bringing up a point, because you're believing in laws. I don't think that they're going to be terribly effective. In the mid-1990s, I wrote a paper and did a study on what we called cyber vigilantism, strike back.
So what, the jester?
Well, in many ways, is cyber vigilantism where the corporate victim takes the law into his own hand, identifies the bad guy, and attacks back to put him out of business. Is that a valid way to defend by having your own attack teams, having your own red teams in every one of your companies?
Not according to the U.S. government. I don't know what the law is here.
I'm not talking law. I'm talking reality.
That's probably a very valid way to do it, yeah. I'd say that would be a good way to make them stop if you were stronger than they were.
But what if you're wrong? What if someone else is used to carry out the attack? It's the same with jurisdiction. Where do you draw the line? How far can you go?
That's true. That happens a lot, at least with the clients I look at. They've got all sorts of ways that attackers could just bounce attack traffic off of them, and they don't understand why this is a problem. It's like, it's going to look like the attack came from you. You
Exactly.
don't want that in the news.
Like just the matter of level of thriftiness. If the attacker is really thrifty, he will use 2 or 3 different companies that are competitors to the actually attack company. So the attack company thinks, oh, they attacked us because they're competitors. We'll send all the red teams, and done we are. And the attacker will not have any impact at all. We just completely leave the scene unseen.
So we should all
I'd
attack
say
Facebook
no.
from 8.8.8.8.
But I'm saying like counterattacks and actual red teams that go after attackers and counterattack them is not the best idea, because you really have to be sure as in jurisdiction that the person that attacked you is really the person that attacked you. And you can never be sure. Like especially in the internet, you cannot be
Does the audience, well, what do you guys think? Using vigilantism is a good thing?
I mean, it's attractive, most certainly. Like I would do it if I had the chance because it's just sexy, but I think it's still wrong.
So it's a good thing, but a wrong good thing. So there's
Moral
morals and
conflict.
ethics
Yeah.
involved in this. There was a recent study that just came out. It was announced 2 days ago in the news that there is a fair number of companies that are actually admitting now that they are going to be using strike-back capabilities, but using sophisticated intelligence attribution mechanisms to hopefully have a better chance of identifying the perpetrators. Yes, sir, the question out here.
I just wanted to react and say, if you respond and attack a company who you suspect attacked you, you can always check if the attack came from them. If you get access to the data, the logs, or whatever, and inquire over there.
So you're saying that you can check if that's really the company that attacked you? Is that what you're saying?
How
can
would
try.
you do that in a reliable way? Like what would be your technical suggestion on how to solve the problem of finding out who actually started the attack?
If you can answer that question, you should come up here and we'll go sit down and you should do the rest of the talk because you've solved InfoSec.
I mean, you never have like an actual crime scene. You don't never have DNA samples or stuff like that. You never have any substantial values that can help to really identify the attacker. That stuff is not there. It's just like some stuff in the logs. That's all you have. Like, this is something that I was missing yesterday in the defense talk when talking about the cloud. Like, how are you going to do forensics? And this is the exact point we're talking about. How are you going to do the forensics in a reliable way to find out who did what in this scenario, who's the actual adversary, and who's just the mule carrying out attacks on behalf of other people.
Well, let's escalate this up a little bit. From a corporate standpoint, what I'm hearing you say is you may not really know that it's Google attacking Facebook or Microsoft attacking Oracle or whatever. However, we do have fair degree of intelligence and capabilities at the national level to know that perhaps Iran is currently suspect of many things. The U.S. and Israel, as was discussed yesterday, may well be responsible for certain well-known attacks. And this is called cyber war, cyber terrorism. Attribution is fairly reliable given the resources. Is striking back at the national level then okay?
You think we didn't attack them first?
I think striking back would be okay if we could find a clear line between cyber terrorism and cyber war, because I don't see it. Like, what's the difference between cyber terrorism and cyber war? It's just a matter of politics, just a matter on which side you are. And if you say that attacking back and being sure that you attack back the right person / instance / whatever, you got to be sure that you do not cross the line. And
Wait, cross what line? I'm not sure I know.
Do you see a difference between cyber war and cyber terrorism? If yes, then please elaborate. Like, what is the difference?
In my opinion,
Yeah.
cyber terrorism is used by what we call an NGO, a non-government organization. Cyber war would be better aligned with nation states. That would be my line, but I agree that it is fuzzy. And striking back at a terrorist NGO, non-government organization, is very difficult because they are physically inside of some national sovereignty. All right, keep those questions coming. Otherwise, I've got a bunch here that I'm going to keep working down. One of the things that in the last few years that has become very popular with attackers has been, we initially called them lowland attacks, and they were very quiet instead of a very noisy DDoS. And it has evolved that now the buzzword is APT, Advanced Persistent Attacks, that use many vectors, and they may use some social engineering, and it may use some physical attack, and it may use some cyber attack and combinations thereof. What is the next step in APT?
Yeah, the unicorn. You haven't heard about the unicorn persistent threat?
I want to hear. No, I've not heard about the unicorn. Tell us.
Tell us, Jason. It's just Jason's Twitter handle that he uses to troll people.
I think
What's next?
I think terminology-wise, we cannot go upwards because like this BS bingo thing has been driven too far already. So advanced, persistent threats, like how can you level that up? Like this is already at the top. Like advancedest. So in terminology, from a terminology standpoint, you cannot level it up. You can probably level it up regarding the effects that the whole thing has, or the levers that are being pulled to carry out APTs. Or
Well, the reason I'm asking
APTs.
on this is because there are many reports that have been coming out saying that APTs, because they take so long, often can be very quietly monitored by the victims to be able to identify the activity, learn about them, and that perhaps that is not the best methodology to be used by attackers because that isn't, the APT by its nature has inherent weaknesses. So thinking like an attacker, how do I improve for the next level of attack?
Well, I see, my thoughts on it is that there's just going to be more like out-of-band communication. Like, for instance, I do so much stuff with like 3G, so a company can't really monitor that even if they own the device, whereas if it's on the network, we have devices that can monitor every packet that goes out. We've had them for a while. They're pretty useful, right, in detecting attacks. If you put in something like a phone plug or go in through somebody's cell phone that also connects to the network, send it out through 3G or 4G, and unless you're the wireless carrier or can get them involved in it, that all of that data that's being exfiltrated in that case is out of band to the company, regardless of whether you own the device.
I mean, if you're talking about long-running attacks, then the probability of success for this long-running attack will depend on the detectability. So that means if you minimize the traces, if you harden forensics or just disable the victim to actually find out that it's being attacked, then you're on a new level. And there is like new levels you can do that. Like we talked about the cloud yesterday, we're talking about the browser, we're talking about the operating system. Like there's new levels of attacking the user or groups of users or even whole corporate environments by using attacks that are completely untraceable. Just to get in the technical terminology, DOM XSS is one of these things. You just don't see it on the server. It's invisible for the server. You have mutation attacks where you get harmless stuff in, and in the browser it mutates to something harmful and things like that. So this should probably be the direction, minimize detectability.
Does anybody out there have any thoughts as to what the next style of attacks are going to be? Any really evil people in the audience? Show of hands. Evil people.
Not going to tell us.
So nobody's going to tell us about their 0 day, which brings up one of the other questions that came up, is 0 days from a nation-state level or from a corporate level. Should they be used in an attack methodology, or should they be kept secret?
I think they should be fixed, even though I'm usually working as an attacker. I think 0 days should be fixed. I mean, they're fun and I love them, but in the end, they should be fixed. Like, that's what they are for.
I was actually recently surprised by how much money you can make. You know, if you give it to 0 Day Initiative, they maybe give you like $5,000, $5,000. And if you bring it here, they maybe pay for you to come and put you on television. But if you sell it to like a nation state, you can make a lot of money. So it's very attractive for people who even want to be on the good side because it's expensive to live, you know. So I can see why it's very attractive to instead sell your research to a nation state, write malware for a corporation or a nation state. So I think that's what needs to be fixed, is make it more attractive to do the right thing.
I mean, we do have bug bounty programs like Google bug bounty program, Facebook bug bounty program, and whatnot. And I think it's a good trend. It's still like not even remotely comparable to the numbers that you get when you sell to governments or government-like organizations. In fact, that is. But I think it's setting a trend, and it's also setting an interesting trend that might be affecting us as professional attackers, because I think that it's on the one hand good to do crowdsourcing in security, to crowdsource penetration tests, but on the other hand, it raises like an imminent danger for us, because I think that the classic pen tester, as sitting here in this room in numerous times, in numerous situations probably, will not be that important anymore if you have like a huge crowd of kids constantly testing the application, as it's the case with Google. So if you have a look at, for instance, the Google Hall of Fame, where the security experts are being mentioned that found like a small XSS somewhere, it's a nice thing, but it takes financial weight off Google's shoulders to actually pay for penetration testers, because those kids work for cheap. So on the one hand, you have like these very cheap bug bounties, and the company gets a good service for that. And on the other hand, you have like these extremely high bug bounties of selling bugs to governments or to shady bidders. So interesting is what's going to develop in the middle. Like how are we going to be able to still do our pen test job in like 10 years without being overrun by the kiddie crowd that is testing for us for a very cheap price? And how are we still going to keep our conscience and our ethics, so to say, and not sell out to governments and make like literal millions with bugs, depending on the impact. So,
well, you've just brought up so many issues that I'm thinking of. So again, please, if you have questions, keep them up. But I've got like 20. I keep thinking, because you keep bringing things up that I don't agree with, which is kind of fun.
Bottom line is, I think that it's good that parties bid for bugs and that you can sell bugs, but it's a complicated issue, because on the one hand you have cheap prices, on the other hand you have very high prices, and we're kind of moving somewhere in the middle. We're going to find a good solution for that, because this is
well, I'm going to bring something up that Georgia just mentioned. A few minutes ago you were saying, let's have some laws, and I clearly disagreed with that. Now we're talking about zero-day attacks and selling them for gobs of money to nation states. As an American citizen, if I or you as a French citizen or you as a Dutch citizen develop and sell a beautiful zero-day attack to an enemy of your country,
says it right on your passport, you're not a citizen anymore.
is that an attack against your own country?
Passport says it is.
So if you knowingly sell the exploit with everything to, let's just say, some country out there that is, let's just say Malaysia or something like that. I don't want to name actual countries, but let's just say you sell your exploit to Malaysia, and you know it, and you know about the consequences. Then yes, like this is a problem. But as long as there is
when you say a problem, is that illegal? Is it illegal? Is that an attack against the country?
Depending on the legal framework, yes, but there should be a legal framework for these situations. I agree with you on that. Like, I'm not a big fan of laws. I'm not a big fan of just plastering everything with laws and hoping that they're going to actually keep people from doing something. But if it happens, then there has to be a framework that covers that.
So how do you make the distinction then between a programming error that causes malicious damage, or the intent?
Well, it's easy. Like, a bug is not an exploit. An exploit is an exploit. A bug is a bug.
Are you saying what if somebody exploits it on accident?
Absolutely. I mean, programming error. We've had how many systems have gone down over the years because of NT failures? Were those attacks or were they programming errors? And how do you identify the difference?
I think if it's that easy in this day and age where security is so much in the news, if it's that easy to take down your system that somebody can do it on accident, you deserved it. So.
But still, you don't just create a sophisticated exploit by dropping your head on the keyboard or by having your cat walk over the keyboard. That
just doesn't happen anymore.
Because
And if
like the word is in it, sophisticated exploit, advanced persistent threat. So this has to be done consciously. And you don't just by accident write an exploit. You by accident, of course, all the time find bugs, but you don't write exploits by accident.
I don't know though. Have you met like Peter's daughter, Corlin Coder? I think she could do it just from typing, write a sophisticated exploit, but that's about it.
So, as learning how to compromise systems and learning how to defend, a lot of people write hostile code intentionally in order to test. Now, when that code gets out into the hands of a nation-state enemy, how do you make that distinction?
Well, if it's written already and if it gets out and if it's being used against company products, then it's not a 0-day anymore, and there's most likely going to be a patch. So it's extremely unlikely that there is going to be 0-day circling around, leaving a company network, then going to the state, and then being used against a different state. Like, this is like a very much of a long shot. So,
And you believe that's unlikely?
I believe it's unlikely.
What does the audience think? Does the audience think that that is an unlikely scenario or a likely scenario that it could happen? Neither one. No opinion. What country am I in again that has no opinion? Yes.
I think it depends on the ethics of the guy testing the bug. The guy in the company that has the exploit and test it. If he wants to sell it, it's likely. It's a human. It's back to the human. And what else is the engineering?
True, but ethics is like such a fluffy word. Like, for example, if you say ethics and you combine you combine the whole thing with patriotism. Like, where does it stop? Again, where do you draw the line? When you're a patriot and you write some malicious code that is going to attack militia, is it still ethically correct? I'm sorry. Or is it just crossing the line and just like hacktivism? Like, where do you stop?
Shout it out. So what you are believing in a 10, 12, 50, the bug track mindset, have a central database of all exploits as soon as you discover one because the vendors do not update and patch enough.
If I had time, I'd tell you stories of how many times when I was working with Maggie, we would call Microsoft and give them the code that we wrote that exploited Word or exploited something, and they would just completely reject us. They would write articles defaming Maggie, saying he was not a real security researcher. And then it wasn't until we released it publicly that you would see it fix, sometimes within 3 or 4 months. But when you tried to disclose it professionally, selling it to a real database or getting it in their hands, it was never fixed. They just shoved it under the rug. So if you really want to see security patches, you really want to see holes fixed and bugs patched, you don't have the option of saying, well, I can make money doing this or not. It depends on where you're forgetting about patriotism, where your loyalties lie. It's either security or it's money. I don't think both of them always.
So it's either security or obscurity as well is what we often say. How do you feel about that? Should vulnerabilities be completely exposed open source?
It depends.
So
I do not exactly agree with what you said, because I do not exactly agree that you cannot make money with vulnerabilities while at the same time acting in a ethically correct way. Like, of course, everybody has his own ethics, but if there is a way to sell a bug to a vendor of which you know that this vendor is going to give this bug to the affected vendor, and this is going to happen within days, and I saw this happening, I actually experienced this like multiple times, then I think it's okay to have like both, to have the bug is fixed, and you still get some quid for it. So I think this is a fair deal. Not all companies and not all bug brokers do that, and there is a lot of shady bug brokers, and there is like a lot of new bug brokers, so you have to just kind of conquer the market shares. But there are some that are actually clean, and I appreciate that this exists, because you can have both. So it's not an either or, it's just like, you just need to find the right solution for you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
course. Yeah.
And that takes 18, 20, 30 months before they can negotiate a deal. In the meantime, every client that you have that's using that bug, the reason you found it because you were doing the pen test or you were exploiting that box, those companies are all in danger.
But then it's not the problem of. But then it's not the problem of the bug broker. Then it's the company, the problem of the actual company that should receive the bug and doesn't react properly. And I do know that there is bugs out there that have been existing for like 24 months and more. But this is still a mindset that has been around for 5 years. And I think things are getting better right now.
Get back into your fluffy word though, ethics. So if I know the bug exists on your server, and I know that it could be exploited, and I know it could potentially ruin your business, and I do nothing, and then a month later I see that Anonymous or God or whoever one of these other activist groups that pops up is now molesting your server completely, do I just turn my back and say, he was stupid, he didn't fix the bug?
Complicated.
That's why we're up here discussing this. And again, this brings up a couple of the things. You both were just mentioning penetration testing, where we are simulating attacks in many ways. How aggressive should penetration testing really be?
As aggressive as the contract allows. So,
as the country allows?
As the contract.
As much as the.
Well, no, I'm saying forget law, forget all of that. From a pure security standpoint, how harsh, how aggressive should pen testing be?
As harsh as the client will let you. I mean, if the client says it's out of scope, then it's out of scope. But I would always encourage my clients that, an attacker, as you said in your talk, they don't just attack from 9 to 5. They don't leave out social engineering because you're not comfortable with it. They don't leave out denial of service because you're not comfortable with it. They're going to do whatever it takes. So definitely I would always encourage my clients to do as much of a full scope pen test as possible, but in the end, you can't force them to.
But you got to stay goal-oriented. Like, you can have like a physical penetration test, and you can just beat up the admin. Like, you can just go there and just beat him in the face as often as possible, so he cannot do his job anymore. You have a denial of service. Like, this is what you should not do, because this is like definitely again crossing the line. This is not goal-oriented. So it's important what the goal of the penetration test is. For this, you have to figure out what the actual asset of the company is. We had this topic yesterday, and then you can decide how aggressive you can be with the penetration test.
Well,
like, why would I try to bring a server down if my directive is to find a SQL injection vulnerability? Why would I DOS it then? It's not the goal of the test. If the company wants to be tested against SQL injections, then they get a SQL injection test and maybe some other stuff that we find on the way, but we're not going to DOS the server, even though we might know that it's DOSable, but it's not in scope.
Well, when you say you can't beat up the guard, if they really want a full-scope physical penetration test, of course, no, you're not going to beat up the guard, but you might create the scenario where the guard is incapacitated to see if they have additional checks. Get the company in on it. The guard is incapacitated in some way. You don't beat them over the head, but create the scenario. The guard's incapacitated. What checks do you still have now? Because the real attacker may beat up the guard.
Because of, again, the combination of both the physical, beating up the guard, tasing him. Is that okay? Can we tase him?
I don't think you should physically harm him, but you can talk to him and say, we're creating a scenario, and here's your boss, and we're going to say you're incapacitated, and so come with me, and so we're not actually going to hurt them, but create the physical scenario where he could be incapacitated. What checks do you still have in place? Because it shouldn't just be a single point of failure. If the guard is incapacitated, we would want to test that in our test.
Now, I've heard the argument, and you just brought it up, that in a pen test, which is simulating an attack, that often DOS and DDoS is excluded for many reasons. But how much does that really match reality when DOS and DDoS should have some sort of disaster recovery mechanisms and plans in place as part of the overall security procedure? Does that mean that you're at all accurate?
True, but it's again a question of the asset. If availability is the asset, then you should definitely test against DDoS or DOS, like whatever way there is to do so and whatever way there is to defend against it. But if this is not in scope, if availability is not an asset, then ignore it. If customer data is more important.
Forget contract, from a pure security standpoint, should DOS and DDoS be part of a proper attack simulation?
Are you saying we should pen test without a contract, without an order
so? I'm purely hypothecating here as to what is right. What is the most effective way to simulate an attack? Because that's the way the bad guys would really do it.
But you got to specify attack. That's the point. Like you can just say attack and burn down the building and see if they're fireproof. But
That depends where their backup facility is. If it's in the same building, then they're really in trouble.
Attack, so you have to know what you're going to attack. You have to be goal-oriented. Like you have to have a goal, and you have to think like the attacker, who also has a goal, most probably.
Well, that brings us.
Like attacking without a goal is vandalism, and you can't protect against vandalism unless you have a lot of dogs that are like very wild and trained and stuff like that.
Well, you can, again, bring back to the same thing. Okay, so the building burnt down. We have to go to our hot site or our cool site or our cold site. You can simulate that. What do we have in the way of backup? So you wouldn't really burn down the building, but you say, okay, the building's gone. What do we do now? Disaster recovery planning.
Yes, sir.
It's okay, yeah. What I was going to say is pretty much what I think you were about to lead on to there. When you think a DOS is possible, you're thinking, right, we can have a DOS here potentially. You could then approach the company and say, can we set the situation up? Both taking out guards physically and servers. I think your server is potential. Can we set it up? Can we have an immediate backup, a hot failover system so we can try it, but under controlled situations?
True.
I think that's an excellent point, yes.
Has anybody in the room ever been involved in a true military red team exercise? Was that a yes or a 10-minute sign? Has anybody been involved in a red team, a real military red team? I have observed a couple of them over the years, and the reason I've been pushing this point so much is because when the government, at least the U.S. government and the British government, when they get involved in these things, all hell breaks loose in order to simulate the real sorts of panic that is created in these, and that's why I'm somewhat critical of organizations, and it's not a view, but it's of the organizations that allow themselves to have simulated attack scenarios that where they hope to get a positive result instead of a realistic result. Do you have a comment on that?
Again, what means realistic? Like it all depends on the attacker, and it all depends on the goals of the attacker. What is realistic?
As evil as I can possibly get. Yes, sir.
So, if I ask you to use SQL injection, you took this example, into my systems, okay? I ask you this. My intent is not to test against SQL injection, is to test against anything. And I thought about this because I knew about this, but all the 0 days you're talking about, I don't have a clue about them. So maybe I have 10 of them on my systems and I don't know them. So I would say break loose the hell on my systems. Break everything. Don't lose my data. That's all I'm asking for. And all I'm asking if I ask a pen test is break everything you can, penetrate everything you can. Just don't do the harm. That's the only limit that I'm asking if I'm a client of a pen tester.
But how
don't
are you
do the harm. The rest you can do it.
But how are you going to do that in a distributed denial of service scenario? How are you not going to do harm with DDoS?
The DDoS is different. Because this will do harm on my system. I will need a duplicate system, a test one, which is the same size of my production. I can't do it. Or then I do it during the night when there's no client on my SaaS software systems. Okay. Or I warn my users, or I do something like that. But if I really want to know that, I will find a business way to sign on the contract and tell you, yeah, go for it. Boost everything. I signed for this, and I have to see with my CEO if it's okay. That's my part of the decision to take, not yours. If you want to take this part, you're doing too much work for me. Thank you, but you negotiate with my CEO then.
Now, let's add one more piece to the equation. Fundamentally, I guess I'm much more evil than either one of you because of what I've been done for the last 25 years is purely thinking evil. We've talked physical, we've talked some cyber, we've got a little mobile thing going on here, and that's going to be huge. I fully agree with you. One of the most effective attacks against England was in 1987 by the IRA. And it was not the bomb down in the city of London. It was the IRA's threat that they had placed bombs around the Circle Road, the M25 around London, and London shut down for 2 days. So we're seeing this now a little bit more, whether you call it perception management, misinformation, disinformation. Accelerate your attacks. Now add some social engineering to it. What have you got?
Can you repeat the question?
Give me a simulation. Talk to me with more social engineering adding into my attacks, because we're seeing some of this from Anonymous. Mm-hmm. And I was asking earlier about, okay, how do we make APTs? Well, what's the next? What's coming next?
So what's
I'm
the super
adding
APT? Yeah, the SAPT.
SAPT?
Super APT.
Super APT. Now, is this with social engineering or...
I still strongly believe that traceability might be social engineering as well, because it always works. Like, you always have the human as the wetware, as shapeable, formable, and manipulatable.
No, I'm saying from perception management in the media, from an outreach, not phishing, not the old crap that we're all talking about, but at a much larger scale to influence the mindsets of your victims.
I don't see that as working, because we're already doing that. I mean, companies, and I see it working to some degree. I mean, I get more pen test work because people are seeing it on the news that all their competitors are getting hacked, and they're putting it on the news, and people are losing face. But I don't think on the whole that it's really changing the state of things, that it's on the news so much that people are getting hacked.
Yeah, the other problem is that you don't really know if the pen test is actually helping them. Like, I've seen a lot of pen test approaches. I'm not talking about anyone here in the room, just in general, where the pen test is like completely useless because they run a scanner and they send out the scanner report and then that's it. So money well spent. It was just like completely burning the money. But anyway.
You've already, first, over here, please.
So thinking evil, basically fear is the goal, right? So the target, the best target would be just target the media. Get the media, I mean, not talking about you, but just target them directly. If you can hijack media, well, that's very, very powerful, isn't it?
Wasn't there this kind of more or less fun attack carried out by some artists? I think it was in Poland or in Czechoslovakia back then when it still existed, where they kind of hijacked a video stream that was like showing a landscape, and all of a sudden in the middle of the landscape there was like a nuclear explosion, and the people were freaking out. So this is something that you could actually utilize. You said it already. You use the media, impact the media, manipulate the media. If you're there, then you can spread fear, and then you have like the perfect form of terrorism, because that's what terrorism is all about. So yeah.
By the way, that wasn't me, actually.
Huh?
That wasn't me.
Over here, yes, sir. Stand up so we can all hear you, please.
About getting the APTs stronger, we saw that detection was the key to find who attacks. And also going with the social part, don't you think that criminal bug bounty, like a criminal who would pay thousands of crypt kiddies to find bugs and report them to him, would generate so much attacks against the system of the victim that they won't see where to look. They won't, and they will get used to being attacked.
Oh, you mean like hiding the dangerous attack in like a huge grape of small attacks, irrelevant attacks? I think that already happens. That is not new.
I think Anonymous does that to some extent with the ion cannon.
I mean, bring it to a distributed level where you post a bug bounty. If someone finds a bug, you will pay them, and it will bring a crowd of kiddies wanting to get money to do this for you.
Well, I'm told our time is up. I come to the conclusion I'm much more evil than either one of my panelists.
More
up
evil
here.
than how I play myself on stage, anyway.
All right, then we'll have to talk later. If you want to talk true evil, we'll all do this offline. Join me in thanking the panelists very much, and we'll move on to the next session. Thank you.